Okay, by my watch, it is 7 o'clock. Let's get started. Welcome. My name is Laura Winnie, and I am the educator for DuPage County Animal Services. Tonight's webinar is going to be on red-eared slider turtles and all about how to care for them and prepare to bring one into your home. So today we're going to talk about basic information on red-eared sliders, where you can find them if you don't have one already, the perfect setup, couple different options there, what a healthy diet looks like, and of course, interacting with your turtle. Before we dive into those topics, just a couple of Zoom housekeeping things. Everybody is currently muted, and that is to prevent any audio interference. We are recording this to post to our YouTube page, so please keep yourselves muted. The program should last about 45 minutes to an hour, but I will stay at the end for any questions. So like I said, throw questions in there at any point. I'll look at them at the end, and of course, you're always free to throw some in there at the very end too if I didn't address a particular concern. Now, I will admit to not being a turtle expert. We do get red-eared slider turtles at DuPage County Animal Services, and I do have coworkers who have them in their homes. So if I cannot answer your question, please bear with me. I will get back to you with an answer. Okay? Wonderful. Let's get started. So a lot of people see turtles and they just assume that one turtle is just the same as the next, right? All of them have the same needs. All of them have the same types of personalities, and that can't be further from the truth. Yes, there are some basic things when you're talking about aquatic turtles, like a red-eared slider, amongst other aquatic turtles that are going to be the same, but you can't assume that something you read about, for example, a painted turtle, is going to be the exact same for a red-eared slider. They are different species and they do have unique needs. So today we are specifically talking about red-eared slider turtles as they are the most popular. Some of this information can be applied to other aquatic turtles, but really, if you're looking at other aquatic turtles, this is not the webinar for you, and I would recommend that you look further into the specific species that you're interested in. So red-eared sliders get their name because of that red blaze, we'll call it, right across the sides of their heads, near where their ears are, thus the red-eared, okay? Adults have a dark brown to olive colored carapace, that's the hard top shell, and then they have that yellow patterned plastron, that's the belly shell. Okay, and we'll see a picture of that later on. The little baby guys are a lot of times very bright green. So, and they're very cute and very little. You can see here on the picture the size difference between baby little red-eared slider turtle and adults. So they do grow typically quite big for than what we're thinking of when we see them that first time, maybe when we're purchasing a young one or a juvenile. They have very strong, sturdy, jagged beaks that they use to eat plant matter, and so they can use it for ripping. And they will also eat smaller aquatic animals. So they are an omnivore. They will do both vegetation and proteins. Now, juveniles are going to spend a lot of their time in the water. That water is very important. So that's why a lot of times when you go to pet stores and you see those juveniles, there's not a whole lot of land areas for those baby turtles because they want to spend most of their time in the water. However, it is essential that we provide basking areas because they need it for their development. Okay, they need it to live a healthy life. So adults absolutely 100% need a basking area that's completely dry and has lighting sources and heating sources, which we'll talk about later. You cannot sex the turtles until they reach maturity, and males are going to be smaller than females. So a male is going to reach sexual maturity around the time that they reach 4 inches long. So that's about 2 to 5 years old. Okay. Females are sexually mature when they reach 6 to 7 inches, about 5 to 7 years. So they take a little bit longer to mature than males. And like I said, they do grow bigger than males. If you are getting your red-eared slider turtle from a breeder who recorded the incubation temperature of the eggs, cooler incubation temperatures produce males. Females are developed under warmer temperatures. So the heat, the temperature for the eggs during their incubation period determines the sex of the turtle, which is really, really cool. But that's one of the reasons why we can't tell until they're older. So males are going to get to be about 6 to 9 inches long at full length. Females are going to get between 10 and 14 inches long, so quite a bit bigger. Now, these are a relatively easy pet turtle in terms of their diet is relatively easy to get a hold of. You don't typically have to special order for their food. You can typically find it in pet store, easily accessible online for ordering. But by no means are they a starter pet. They are not something that your average 5, 7, 10, 15-year-old is going to be able to take care of on their own, because they have a lot of specialized stuff that you have to pay attention to, and they can live over 50 years. So in the wild, they're known to live over 50 years. In human care, the average is significantly lower than that. The average for turtles in human care is between 20 and 30 years, looking at a good high average. And a lot of that comes down to improper care. They're not getting all of the things that they need from us, so they don't have as long a lifespan. So while on the outside or on paper, they seem like a really easy pet, something that you can get for a child, by no means is this going to be within most children's abilities to take care of on their own. They can get very large. They typically are not recommended for handling. We'll talk about that in just a second. And keeping the habitat to the proper temperatures can be very, very challenging. We are going to talk about that in depth later on in the presentation. But it's important to note that red-eared sliders are not native to this part of Illinois. They are native to a lot of parts of Illinois, specifically south of us, where the winters aren't as harsh. So keeping their climate and their environment to a suitable temperature is going to be a major factor in helping with that lifespan and making sure that you're providing good quality life for them. So when I mentioned that they can get pretty large, I mean, we talked about the females, they can get up to 14 inches long. Their habitat needs to reflect their size. So for a baby that you're bringing home, a little baby turtle, you can start off with a little baby tank. Think about 10 gallons of water for every inch of turtle. Okay, so if you get the smallest turtle that's legal to buy, which is a 4-inch turtle, that's a 40-gallon tank to start with. Okay, but if they grow up to 12 inches, let's say you have a female and they're not even the biggest female, they just grow up to 12 inches, you need a tank to hold at least 120 gallons of water. And that's minimum. The more room you can give them, the better, but that's the minimum. Their habitats are also going to need regular attention, and that tank water needs to be changed about every 2 weeks, and you need to clean the whole tank at least once every month. So that's in there and scrubbing and everything. And it does take a lot of time to thoroughly clean everything. The germs and bacteria that can build up in a dirty tank are very, very detrimental to the turtle. It can harm them in so many different ways. So definitely mandatory to keep that tank clean. And as I said, it's typically beyond the abilities of your average, even teenager, okay? Because let's face it, what teenager wants to give up an entire Saturday every couple of weeks to clean out the turtle tank? You know, that's something that may not be a realistic expectation. So it's a definite thing to have a conversation with your kids. If your kids are super, super interested in getting a turtle, you know, and they're like, oh, Mom, Dad, it's fine. I can take care of it. I can, you know, turtles are easy. Time to, you know, really set the expectations to where they need to be, and making sure that your child understands the responsibilities, and that you as the parent and guardian are going to be there making sure that they are doing that. Because, you know, as we like to say at DuPage County Animal Services, these aren't your kids' pets. They're your pets that your kids help take care of. Okay, that's the great way to think about it. These are family members. They are living beings. They need, and they require a lot of responsibility and a lot of care. And it's a lot to put on young shoulders. So they're the adults' pets. The kids help take care of it, and that's a great way to build up responsibility. But by no means is a red-eared slider a good idea to have as only the child's responsibility. Okay, so just so we're putting it out there. There are other animals that are easier, that require less responsibility, and we can talk about that if you're interested. But as far as easy pets for kids, aquatic turtles aren't what I would call one of them. And another reason for that is because certain people are susceptible to salmonella that is naturally found on turtles. It's a bacteria that can cause illness, hospitalization, and in severe cases, it can be fatal. Okay. Now, this bacteria lives on the turtle, in the water, even in the tank, but it doesn't really affect the turtle. It's just on them. It's just part of their biota, part of the, you know, bacteria and things living on them. Doesn't really affect them at all. So what we don't want to do is exactly what this child is showing us in this picture. Okay, never, never, never kiss a turtle or cuddle it anywhere close to your face, because that's just inviting the bacteria right into your system there. If we are handling turtles, we want to make sure that we are very thoroughly washing our hands before and after, to make sure that we're not transferring any harmful bacteria either to the turtle or from the turtle. And the CDC recommends not to have pet reptiles in homes with at-risk residents. So those could include children younger than 5, adults that are 65 or older, or people with immune systems that have been weakened by certain medical conditions. Those conditions could be diabetes, liver and kidney disease, cancer, or even their treatments. So if you are taking immunosuppressant medications, then you are more susceptible to the salmonella bacteria causing a severe illness. So it's recommended not to have reptiles in your home in those instances, simply because you're never going to get rid of the salmonella on a turtle. It's there and it's just a natural part of them. So understanding that, to make sure that we are keeping everybody healthy and everybody, you know, up on their hand washing is going to be very, very important. Okay, so we've talked about some of the negatives. We've talked about some of the realities. And let's say that you're like, I'm good. We understand. We're not, having our kid kiss a turtle. Perfect. All right. So where do we find them? Well, there are a couple different places. All right. Now, of course, working for DuPage County Animal Services, I am a giant fan of the adoption option. But the reality with red-eared slider turtles is that they are so numerous that rescues cannot take them in. And you will find this of even reptile rescues in our area. They will say explicitly on their websites, we do not accept red-eared slider turtle relinquishments. And the reason for that is they typically stay in rescues for a very long time, taking up necessary resources from other animals. They do require a pretty elaborate setup that not every foster family or brick and mortar shelter is able to provide. And, they might hang around for a while because a lot of the draw of the red-eared slider turtle is that cute little baby that people see in pet stores. So by the time that someone is tired of them or can't care for them anymore, they're at that adult phase, which not as cute, not as little, and not as, quote, marketable, easy to find a home for. So that being said, there are places that will take in red-eared slider turtles. Municipal animal shelters like ourselves, we do take them in. You can also find them through rescues on Pet Finder. So a lot of rescues depend on Pet Finder to put their animals out there. And I did a search earlier today and I did find a few rescues in our area that had a couple of red-eared sliders available for adoption, but each rescue had like maybe one or two. So I didn't have a rescue that I could say, these guys always have red-eared slider turtles. Nope, you're going to need to do a little bit more homework than that. Now, that being said, a lot of times you do get people who, for whatever reason, are no longer able to care for their red-eared slider and are looking to rehome them. And people who rehome on their own can sometimes get a lot of flack for, dropping the ball, I guess would be a nice way to put it. But the important thing to understand is that these people are trying to do the right thing. They are trying to find a new home for an animal that they can no longer provide proper care of. They're not going out into the woods and just dropping the turtle in a pond somewhere and keeping their fingers crossed. They are being upfront and they are trying to find a good home, a better home than what they can provide. Because when we look at the needs that these turtles have and the space requirements, if you have to spend thousands of dollars to move somewhere, sometimes you have to make unfortunate choices where those items cannot fit, will not fit, are not allowed, something like that. So you do have to make those hard choices. So non-traditional options by looking at rehoming sites is also a good place to look. So rescueme.org, adoptapet.com, and even Facebook. You can find places where people can post their adoptable turtles online that need a good home. And these are turtles that, what's nice is you can get a little bit of background on them directly from the previous owner, and you are 1000% saving a life there because that's an animal that has nowhere to go with a positive outcome because very few places will take them. Now, if you are interested in purchasing, we want to look at reputable options, and we'll talk about why in just a minute, why some places are more reputable than others. So there are online breeders that you can go to. There are brick and mortar stores that you can go to. Random guy at the flea market would not recommend, because chances are they're not going to be able to provide you with the information you want. And that is making sure that that animal is captive bred. We'll talk more about why that's important. Also, have they had a medical examination? Do they provide any resources for care? So the guy at the flea market with the bucket full of baby turtles, one, you need to make sure that you're staying within the legal limits of purchasing red-eared slider turtles. In the state of Illinois, you cannot purchase a turtle for anything under 4 inches. That back shell needs to be at least 4 inches long. Anything under that is illegal. And the random guy at the flea market may not necessarily follow those parameters as opposed to online breeders and brick and mortar stores. Now, when I talk about captive bred, why is that important? Because we want to make sure that these animals aren't being taken from the wild. We also want to make sure that we are not taking these animals from the wild, because technically wild animals belong to the state where they live in. Like, they literally belong to the state government, okay? And it's just as illegal to take possession of a wild turtle as it is a wild bear or wolf. The consequences are going to be different, I'm sure, but it's just as illegal to have those wild animals in your home. And also, turtles have a built-in GPS system of where they were born, so where home is. And when you take a turtle out of the wild, you know, one, nothing is going to compare. Your setup at home, however awesome it is not going to be able to compare to the wild that they were born into. Remember we talked about the differences between, you know, human cared for turtles and wild turtles? Wild turtles live longer because nature is awesome, okay? And it has so much to offer that our living rooms don't necessarily offer for them. So making sure that we're bringing home a captive turtle is going to negate a lot of that, because like I said, they have this built-in GPS, so they're going to try to get back home. You know, when we talk about, like, if you see a turtle crossing the road, you never turn them around, because you've completely negated what they're doing and they're just going to try to cross the road again. If you're trying to help a turtle cross the road, to do so safely, you want to put them on the side of the road that they're facing, that they were headed to, because no matter what you do, they're going to try to get to where they're going. Now, from the other end of the spectrum, sometimes people will take these turtles in. They will, you know, enjoy having a pet turtle for a little bit. Maybe they find a baby and they get the baby, and then once the baby is too big, they're like, okay, we're done. Maybe they get overwhelmed by the care, or they discover that they don't really like pet turtles and they want to just return them to the wild. Most of the time that's going to happen in a different location from where they were from. So then we have that issue with the turtle GPS constantly trying to get back to where it's from, crossing goodness knows how many roadways. But it's also an issue because, like I said, red-eared sliders aren't native to our area, so they're going to have a hard time acclimating to our climate. In other areas of the country where the climate is fine for them, they've become an invasive species because of people releasing pet turtles into the wild, and then the red-eared sliders take over and they beat out native turtles and they really mess with the ecosystem in those areas. So in some states, you actually have to have a special permit for owning a red-eared slider turtle because of the invasive issue where people have been releasing it. So at this point, the government is keeping an eye on who has pet red-eared slider turtles to make sure that you keep your pet red-eared slider turtle and don't continuously build on this issue of invasive species in the ecosystem. All right. So we have talked about where to get your red-eared slider turtle. Maybe you found a fabulous breeder online and you're like, I want a male, and the breeder's like, awesome, okay, I kept the incubation at this temperature, so you're definitely going to get a male. When the turtle's old enough, we can come get him. Perfect. So we want to make sure that we're going to be ready for that red-eared slider in our home. And what does that mean? What do we need? So as I mentioned before, we need to have that tank size is going to reflect the turtle size. And I love this graphic because it really puts it home. You wouldn't put a Great Dane in a cat carrier. Why would you put me in this? And the same can be said of goldfish in those little bowls, okay? We need to consider how much room they need to move around and have an active life, as well as what is in their environment that they need. Now, red-eared sliders are solitary animals. Some experts will say, never, ever, ever put adults together. There have been some arguments for where you can have a few, but you definitely need to make sure you have additional space. So you measure using the largest turtle. And so let's say your largest turtle is 12 inches. Okay, so that's a 120-gallon tank that you have. Then you need half as much additional space. Now this is minimum, so you need 60 extra gallons for that second turtle. So it's going to be a minimum of a 180-gallon tank for those two turtles, okay? And this is something to do your own research on, because there are pros and cons of trying to have a couple of red-eared slider turtles together. I will admit that most of the time I have seen them with just the one. They're not really social animals in that regard, so you're not depriving them of anything by keeping just one in a habitat. So there are a couple different kinds of setups that you can do. So the one we have pictured here is a stock tank, and it's basically a giant plastic tub, okay? What I love about this setup is it is, to us, it looks very unnatural, right? I mean, it looks like, kind of looks like a plastic prison from the outside. But from the turtle's point of view, it is much more natural, because think about a pond. A pond doesn't have glass sides with people peering in at it, right? Right, it's dark on the bottom, okay? So this is a more natural setting from the turtle's perspective. It is also way less expensive. It is typically easier to maneuver around. One of my coworkers, this is actually hers. She said, I bought it at the store and I threw it down the basement stairs, and then I set it up down there. So obviously would not be able to do that with a glass aquarium. Typically, these are going to be much, much larger than your glass aquarium, so a lot more room for your animals. It offers them more privacy, again, that more natural setting, and of course, it is a lot sturdier. Now, they do take up a lot of space. You do need to modify them a little bit for the water valve, because they typically have that outlet valve for draining water, and of course we don't want that. You're only going to be able to see the turtle from above or from when it's in its basking area. And it's a little bit harder to monitor the water quality, so you have to be more diligent about measuring pH levels, checking for cloudiness, and things like that, because it's not as easy to see. It is also not as aesthetically pleasing to us as your standard aquarium, but I do have a video here that gives a in-depth look at the setup. So the important thing is, notice that filter to the side, how big it is. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And everything that's going on. So she has some water plants in here to provide a little bit more natural setting for the turtle. This is the basking box. We'll talk about that later on. And then, there's her turtle, and he's just swimming along and notices the camera. Her turtle's on the shy side, so I think having a glass aquarium would really stress this turtle out, considering how much it enjoys its privacy. So you'll see the light sources, both for light and heat, up on the top there of the basking area. And you can see she can see the turtle, she can interact with the turtle. It's just, you got to put a little bit more effort into interacting with the turtle. Now, your typical glass aquarium has some pros and cons as well. You can see it from many angles. It can be a centerpiece in your home. You know, lots of people like to have aquatic, exotic fish because it's gorgeous. Okay. And it also lets the turtle see out more and lets you see the turtle a little bit more. Now, remember I said that they're kind of solitary, and depending on the turtle's history, may or may not be excited about being able to see out. Now, it also provides more light for the turtle, so it's a little easier to make sure that they're getting the light that they need, because you could have it from multiple angles. You're going to need to update this glass aquarium though a lot. You're going to go through many different tank sizes as your turtle grows. The glass can crack or leak more easily, and then very hard to repair it. A lot of times you just have to replace the entire tank, and they are more expensive, they are a lot heavier, and they're more difficult to move around. So thinking about what are your priorities and what you are looking for with having your turtle and what you want to provide for them in their environment is going to help you decide between those two big options there. So regardless of what you choose, you're going to need to make sure that you are providing heat and light. So UVA bulbs will provide heat. UVB bulbs provide vitamin D and mimics the sunlight, and they are crucial for the health and development of your turtle because it does help produce that vitamin D required to metabolize calcium, which is very vital for a turtle's nutrition. Now, the distance from the basking area should be about 5 to 7 inches for those UVB rays, and you're going to need to replace them about every 6 months because they weaken over time and it may not be noticeable to you. So what I would recommend is when you put in a new bulb, keep the box and write the date on the box that you installed that light bulb, so you have it right there and you know, okay, 6 months from this date I need to replace it. UVA lighting, that heat lighting, is essential for activity, for mood, and also for stimulating hunger and making sure that they're feeding. The heat is one of the main enticements for getting the turtle to bask in that area where they can then get that UVB vitamin D supplement. Okay, so for UVA lighting, you want to have that distance from the basking dock about 10 to 12 inches. So in this picture, the light on the left is probably the UVB light, and the light on the right is the UVA. So the one further away is the one providing that heat. Okay. 85 watts is recommended for hatchlings, for those babies. Less than that, and it's not going to really encourage those babies to come out and bask. If you notice that as your turtle ages, it's not basking as much, you might want to up the wattage to 100. Okay, and definitely get a stand that can be adjusted to right angles and that's not going to tip over. You don't want to have a situation where if your turtle knocks into something, it's going to, push it over, or if it's on the outside of the tank that someone walking by could accidentally knock it over. Those basking areas need to be around 90 degrees. Water temperature needs to be 80 degrees for hatchlings, 75 to 78 degrees for juveniles and adults. So you're also going to need to pay attention to water temperature and making sure that you have a thermometer for that. And sometimes you may need, depending on what you choose, you may need additional heat sources that are just strictly in the water. Now, those lamps are going to help provide a circadian rhythm. So mimicking the sunlight goes more than just providing vitamin D. It also helps regulate their day. Okay. So we want to make sure that the lamps are on 10 to 12 hours, just like for daylight, sunrise, sunset. You don't really need to do anything for nighttime. Moonlight doesn't have as much of an effect for turtles as it would for us. And you don't want to have anything between the lamp and the turtle because you can block some of those necessary rays. A lot of the times the combo bulbs, the ones that say they provide UVA and UVB, they're not going to be enough. Almost everything I have read recommends using those two separate sources. Okay. And those infrared bulbs can cause eye problems, so it's not recommended to use those for red-eared sliders as well. Now, I mentioned when we talked about that stock tank how big that filtration system was. And for red-eared sliders, yeah, turtles are gross. Okay, they are messy eaters. They're pooping all the time, So a regular aquarium, let's say 75-gallon tank, you don't want to get a filtration system for a 75-gallon tank. You want to get a filtration system for a 400-gallon aquarium. Okay, 400-gallon tank, even if you only have a 75-gallon tank. So at least 4 times bigger than the aquarium you have. All right, because they are a lot. No nice way to put it. They're a lot grosser than fish. Okay, so they're going to need some heavy duty cleaning. It's like when we have teenagers in the home versus when we have an adult guest in the home. Chances are you're going to have to be a little bit more diligent on making sure nothing is growing in the teenager's room versus making sure nothing is growing in your adult guest room. All right. Now, we definitely want to make sure that we are paying attention to the water cleanliness as well. You can see here in the picture how bad it can get. 25 to 50% of the water needs to be changed weekly. Remove leftover food daily. So, they're munching on it and little parts and particles are floating in the air. Get that little filtration net and scoop all of that out. And make sure that we are regularly testing those pH levels. So we want it to be pretty balanced between a 6 and an 8. If you have cloudy water, you might want to check the substrate that you're using because some sand can cloud up the water just by virtue of being sand. All right. Recommended substrates are nothing. You don't necessarily need a substrate for red-eared slider turtles. You could use play or pool sand, only 1/4 of an inch deep, so not super deep there, or just river rocks. Okay. You don't want gravel or small pebbles because those could be eaten and that can cause impactions in their digestive system. So stick to that sand, play or pool sand, 1/4 of an inch deep, have nothing at all, or do those larger river rocks so there's no worry of ingestion. For accessories, we definitely want to talk about having that basking place. It can be so many different things. It needs to be completely dry and out of the water. You want it to be big enough to walk around in. So you can use stone, you can use egg crate, which is that white grid stuff that we see here in the pictures, or that was in some of the options. Even some like a plastic litter box with turf on it can be an option. Avoid mesh or screening because that can catch their claws. And if they break a claw, there is blood vessels right there. So it can cause bleeding and you don't want to deal with that. Other things that you can add into the environment for them would be air bubblers, ramps and inclines, easy ways to get up to the basking area. Now, air bubblers do help oxygenate the water, which is essential if you're going to have fish in the tank. If you're just having turtles in the tank, you don't need to worry about that. But they can be fun, and they can actually, enrich the turtles' environment, giving them something to play with, basically. And also, it does help prevent slime and mold buildup within by constantly churning that water. The ramps are going to be essential because you want to make sure that your turtle has easy access to that basking area that's up out of the water. Aquatic plants like water hyacinth, water lilies, and duckweed can all be really fun. If you notice that, your turtle is munching on them quite a bit, you might need to change them out regularly. It could also be like a sometimes thing, a sometimes fun enrichment activity. And for your females, providing a nesting box up in that basking area, somewhere where they can lay those eggs, is going to be good for them. And then it also makes it easier for you to clean those out. So talking about munchy things like the aquatic plants, we want to talk about a healthy diet for our turtles. It does change a little bit with age. I mentioned that they're omnivores, so they are doing both vegetation and proteins. Hatchlings are going to be higher on the protein end of it. Juveniles and adults are going to need more on the vegetation end of it. Turtles will pretty much eat whatever you have in there, so you want to be very cognizant of what you're providing for them. Leafy green vegetables to provide can include green leaf lettuce, dandelion greens, turnip greens, red leaf lettuce, and some of the aquatic plants that I mentioned before. Pellets can provide a lot of that protein. There are other supplements that you can throw in there as well, but really those leafy greens and those pellets should be the basis of your turtle's diet, with some fun sweets and treats thrown in there. For hatchlings, the size of their head every day. Okay, so that's the amount of pellets, the size of their head every day. Because remember, those pellets have the protein, and they need more protein than adults do. Adults, same amount, size of their head, but instead of daily, do it like 3 times a week, or just a few pellets every single day. Okay, so depending on what your schedule works out and what you're looking at, you can do a few pellets every day, or you can just limit the pellets to a couple times a day to make sure that they're not getting too much protein as a juvenile or an adult. Treats and supplements that you may be interested, you can give richer vegetables like endive lettuce, romaine, kale, or carrots once a week. Fruits 2 times a month, so every other week or so. Berries, there are tons of really fun videos of turtles eating berries, and I know the temptation. If it's cute, we want to do it all the time, especially for our kids. 2 times a month. Okay, so berries, mango, grapes, peaches, watermelon, apples, pears, like there are all sorts of fruits that they can have. But remember, this is like ice cream cake for turtles. I'm not even saying it's ice cream for turtles, it's ice cream cake for turtles. We definitely want to be doing ice cream cake every single day. All right. You can give some specialty protein items like snails, crickets, earthworms, dried shrimp. They do have dried worms a couple times a month as well, because again, for our adults and our juveniles, we don't want to have as much on the protein side. The calcium is really essential for many of their body systems. So you can do Cuttlebone, easily purchased in pet stores, a quarter of their size 2 times a month. Okay. And you can talk to your vet if you're concerned about any discrepancies that you see with them that maybe result in either too much calcium or too little calcium. That's something that a conversation you can have with your vet. Now, we really want to make sure that we are not overfeeding. Again, I know a turtle eating a berry is adorable, but their shells grow at a set rate. Okay. This is possible. They can get too fat for their shell. So think fat guy in a little coat, but it's a suit of armor for a knight. Okay, that's not comfortable. It's going to squeeze stuff. It can harm their internal organs. It can make it so they can't get inside their shell, that they can't retreat inside their shell, and it limits their mobility. If you see the picture here of this red-eared slider, look at the fat rolls by its legs. It's going to limit even its swimming ability, and that is not good for so many reasons, but even just for their mental health, because it helps them relieve stress when they can hide away from something scary. And if they can't, that's going to be very distressing for them. So we want to make sure that we are providing that balanced diet. We also want to make sure that we are giving them plenty of opportunities for exercise, and some of that's going to come down to tank size, that we make sure that they have enough room to move around in. That basking area size, we want to make sure they have enough room to turn around and roam around a little bit there. But it can also come from interacting with our turtle. So we've talked about how a lot of turtles, they're more of a looking at pet than a cuddling pet, right? Right. But there are definitely amazing fun ways to interact with our pets. So I don't think I've ever seen anything cuter than a baby turtle being scrubbed with a toothbrush, until I saw a video of an adult turtle being scrubbed with a toothbrush. So I will play this in just a minute, but their scoots, the pieces on that carapace, on that back shell, they shed them. And if they're not getting that proper diet, it's harder for them to shed those. So this video here, you can see actually how the carapace is curved upward. That is from a very, very poor diet. It's from that vitamin D deficiency. They didn't have the proper light set up in their former home. So the owner here is helping them shed those dead scoots to get them off. So you can use that soft toothbrush, soft bristles is going to be great to help loosen them. And bonus, you're going to get a little butt wiggle. And we're just going to hang out here and enjoy this moment. Yeah, that was fabulous. Okay, so in addition to monitoring their shell, you want to look for sores, discoloration, or unusual spots. If you see sores, it could be an indication that bacteria is building up in their environment, or that they've had an injury, or that there is a vitamin deficiency going on that's making it hard for them to have that, good shedding that they need to. We also want to make sure that we are taking a look at their feet, and that we are looking at their eyes. Okay, so those are good places. You never want cloudy vision. You might also notice some discharge from either the eyes or the nose, sneezing. You might also see swelling behind the ear area. They are subject to metabolism disease, like from insufficient vitamin D or calcium, or even vitamin A deficiency. So again, a lot of these issues can come from poor husbandry That's from us. That's from us not providing what they need. So making sure that we are, in touch with a vet, especially if you are rescuing an adult turtle that needs additional support, making sure that you have a game plan with your veterinarian is going to be very, very helpful. Now, I know it sounds silly, but yeah, you can play with a turtle. Okay, there are ways to enrich your turtle's life, to build up your relationship. One of the ways is food. Many animals are food motivated. Turtles are no exception. And you might see that turtles become very excited. That is our interpretation of their behavior when we come into the room because, oh, it's feeding time. So they might swim right up to the tank. They may follow you back and forth as you walk in front. And us, interpreting their behavior, sometimes we interpret it as begging for more food. Remember, turtles are opportunistic. So if they see that something works to get them food, they're going to keep doing it. Okay. They're kind of like dogs in that degree. They're going to use their behavior instead of puppy dog eyes to get what they want. So while this is super cute and fun, be the human in the room, be the responsible pet owner, make sure that you are keeping those snacks to a minimum. But another way to use food as an enrichment is feeder fish. Remember, they are omnivores and they will hunt out in the wild, including smaller animals. So some good feeder fish that you can put in their tank with them are mosquito fish, molly guppies, swordtails, and endlers. And you can find those typically through pet stores, online sources where there's going to be turtle supplies anyway. You can also up the game of their environment by having a play pool in the backyard and using that as field trips. Definitely don't recommend having those as their main source because there are many dangers of keeping them outside long term. One is even a slow escape is an escape. So if you're not there, it doesn't matter how slowly the turtle is walking, they can still get away. All right. We want to make sure that we are providing shaded water areas, especially on hot days like today. We want to make sure that that water isn't too hot, and you still want to provide dry basking places. So 100% yes, you can use areas outside to provide them an enriching environment, but make sure that we are still giving them the different types of areas that they're going to need. Now, this is of course not the be all end all of red-eared slider turtle resources. Luckily for us, we live in the age of the internet where everything is at our fingertips. There are aquatic turtle groups on Facebook that you can join that have amazing educational posters. VCA hospitals, so they have different sections on care for different types of animals, including red-eared slider turtles. There are different YouTube channels that you can follow that show care and husbandry. Reptifiles is one of my favorite sites because one, it cites their sources and also gives you the bio of the person writing the article, so you know that it's not just random Joe Schmo telling you about turtle care, but it's somebody that actually knows what they're talking about. And 100% make sure that you have a good veterinarian because they are going to be able to answer those questions that come up specifically for your individual turtle that you may not be able to find just by Googling. Not all vets see exotic animals. Exotics are anything that's not a cat or a dog. So it's basically everything else. Exotic vets can get a little bit on the pricey side, But keep in mind that a lot of the medical issues we see with aquatic turtles is because of human error. So something that we did wrong, even with the best intentions, can cause a medical thing. And having the vet find that early and guiding you to change and adapt and provide what the turtle needs is going to be so worth it compared to once it becomes an issue. Okay, once it becomes a hardship on the animal, by then it's going to be a long, drawn out, expensive process to get the animal back to where it needs to be. But vets can find stuff early and help you get on the right path. Now, I will say that pet stores will try to provide resources, but they are also there to sell products. And sometimes they will sell products that are unnecessary, maybe even harmful. So pay attention to the source. If they are trying to sell you something, make sure that that something has been backed by other places as being helpful for your pet. And this is just across the board. I don't know how many times I have seen a commercial on TV that claims to do something fabulous for my dog, but it's also the person selling the product telling me that. So just a little bit of buyer beware, and doing our research is going to be so, so helpful. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. We will get to Q&A in just a minute. Before we do, want to plug, we've got some upcoming webinars. Basic Pet First Aid is going to be coming up in a few weeks, and we're going to talk about how to do a lot of that preventative stuff. This is mostly going to be on dogs and cats, but some of it applies to other animals as well. And then also what to do if your pet is in a crisis before you can get them to the veterinarian. For those interested in fostering animals, we're going to talk about how to successfully foster the animals, talking about decompression, stress signs, and bringing a new animal into your home and how to help them find their forever home. Towards the end of August, we'll be doing Wags to Whiskers, which is all about pet communication and body language and behavior. Typically for cats and dogs, I have a little bit of rabbits thrown in there as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, folks. Now, at any point, if you have questions, you can reach out to me at the shelter. My email is humane.education@dupageco.org. My phone number is 630-407-2808. At DuPage County Animal Services, our goal is to have every pet in DuPage County in a happy, healthy home. So please give us a call if you have questions, if you are struggling, if you need additional resources. That is what we're there for. We are there to help pets and the people who love them. Okay, so let's go to the chat box and see if we have any questions. Okay, do red-eared slider turtles need additional vitamin and mineral supplements like powders in addition to their diet? That is a great question. I have not come across any research that says that. I would say that is 1000% a question for your veterinarian. What I have seen is definitely the calcium supplement, that Cuddle Bone, but your pellet should have most of those vitamin and mineral supplements in there. As far as I know from my research, you shouldn't have to add in additional things beyond that. But again, that is a great question for your veterinarian. I will also do some additional resource and get back to you because that is a great, great question to know. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm going to throw the links to my program survey in the chat box once again. We are always looking for additional ideas and feedback on how we can improve our educational program. So if you can fill out that short survey, I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to hang out here for a few more minutes if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, I hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you so much for joining me and have a great rest of your night.